Okay, hello, and this is Shilpa here. Welcome to my homework quiz tutorial. We're now looking at some advanced repertorization strategies, and today I want to focus on multi-repertorizations or using multiple repertorization sheets. So if you realize most of the repertory experts, you know, gurus, teachers will discourage you from dumping all your rubrics in one repertorization sheet. Now, there's a reason for that. And in HomeoQuest, you can have as many repertorizations as you wish. There are no limitations to how many clipboards or how many repertorization sheets you can create, right? Now, the reason is because if you dump everything in one sheet, you will end up with only big, well known polycrests, and all your lesser, well indicated remedies will get lost. And it's a confusing data because many times a patient comes with so many different layers and so many different states, and it's just it creates a big confusing mess if you try and put all of those symptoms in one sheet. Okay, so to prevent this, it is very important to collect groups of related symptoms in different sheets and look at the various combinations that arise. And in my clinic, I make multiple totalities for the same patient at any given time. I could make a mental totality and a physical totality, or I would make an acute totality and a chronic one, or sometimes I use multiple approaches. So I could use a Kenton approach and a Bonninghausen approach and then compare remedies. So there are so many different options, and it's important to be able to do that. So what I'm going to do now is basically help you understand that with the help of a case example. I'm going to take the case of a girl with fever who came to me with, we made about 4 different totalities for this girl. And I'll tell you why. So I'll tell you what's happening with this girl. So we have worked this case when we were using the crossing and the combining option. And in that video, I've actually helped, repertorize this girl's case in a fever state. So during fever, she had this particular state. She used to feel, that she would die. She was extremely terrified. She was scared of dying. She was, scared of ghosts. She was seeing spirits. She was even dreaming about dying and seeing ghosts. She wanted people with her all the time. So there was this really terrified state during fever. And this fever came up mostly at night. She had red patches on her face. And she was thirstless, but only desired for lemonade. So that was her state during fever. However, when I took the general state of her mentals and physicals in between the fever state, this was what I found. She was dull, introverted. She was all absorbed in her own thoughts and generally lost to the world, but she startled easily, So that was this really different state, completely different than the fever state. And some of the main things that I found in her state were nausea in the morning on waking. It stayed for some time after waking. She had profuse menses, so menstrual issues were a problem. She was thirstless in general, and she had cold perspiration on hands and palms. So can you see? You have a complete different state in her chronic baseline state. So what I did was I made 4 different totalities for this girl. So let's look at the repertorization sheet here. So I've covered how you search for repertory rubrics, how you, repertorize them, how you, put symptoms, combine, contrast them, and cross them in the other tutorials. So make sure you check them. In this one, we are going to only focus on the multi-repertorization process. So in this girl, we made 4 different totalities here. The first one was the mentals during her fever. And these were the ones we did. We have death during fever, ghost during fever, company wants during fever. So we've combined a lot of rubrics here. And this is the totality that we got during her fever, right? Then we made another totality, which was the physicals during her fever. So the fever was generally at night. She had red face with circumscribed patches. She was thirstless with desire for lemonades. So this was the physicals during her fever, and we had crossed a few rubrics to create new rubrics because there were some really important symptoms, right? The third one was we made a chronic mental state. So if you see, her chronic mental state was all about, dullness. She was introverted. We used something called stupefied. She was as if she was intoxicated. She startled very easily. In general, all her senses were like blunted and dull. So that was her state during her baseline mental state. And then we made another totality, which was the chronic physical generals. So we had profuse menses, thirstlessness, perspiration with cold hands, and then she had this nausea in the morning on waking, right? So this was her chronic physical generals. Now, if you dump them all in one repertory sheet, you have something called, we have a multi-repertorization sheet here. So I'm going to check and see what happens when you dump everything in one particular sheet. And so you see, the mentals, the physicals during fever, the chronic physical and mental state, everything. And you can see, some symptoms are covered by some remedies, some symptoms are not. And it's like, none of the remedies actually. Let's see if there is something which covers everything. Well, there's just one remedy which covers all of them, lachesis, and that was no way came up for her when you read the Mathematical picture, right? So this was how the whole case was but otherwise there was nothing that was covering both the mind and the body during the fever and in the chronic state and all her symptoms. So now the option is to now look at different sheets in combination. So let's just check what's coming up for the girl in just the fever state. So we're going to remove the chronic mental state and the chronic physical state. And now what we have is just the fever state. Okay, so these are the mentals during fever and the physicals during fever. And we're using the rubric coverage because I want the remedies to cover all rubrics. And now, if you can see, there are just 5 remedies that cover everything. Pulsatilla, calcarea, lachesis, carbo-wedge, nitric acid. And this girl, she was given pulsatilla for the fever, and she did really well with pulsatilla. So that was what happened during the fever state. Now, let's just look at the chronic state. So I'm adding on the chronic mental and physicals, and we're going to remove the mental and physicals during fever. Got you? So this is her chronic state, and we're going to use the rubric coverage strategy so that we have everything covered. Now, if you look at the rubrics that have the remedies that are covering all rubrics, we have sulfur, lycopodium, sepia, arsenicum, lachesis, conium, petroleum, and ambra grigia. Interesting, right? So I would never have, so these are the smaller remedies that came up, like ambra and petroleum and conium, which I never expected. Well, the polyquest came up, but these are really interesting remedies here. And you know what? When we checked at the baseline and we read the Mathematical picture, we found conium was the remedy that really matched her state. So there was a past history where there was this whole acute shock and, sort of terror and suppression. And she went into the suppression of fever, and this whole intensity of the terror got her into this dull, introverted, stupefied, startled state, actually, and the shock of that, assault, she pushed it inside and she got into this dull, introverted state during the chronic state, but it only came up during her fever, right? It was interesting. And conium is the remedy that covers this sort of intense state, and she really opened up and did very well on conium. So you see, if I was just using all of them and dumping everything in one sheet, then conium was lost. It was somewhere here, and it was like, I would never have actually thought of really looking and trying to look at that remedy because there were so many remedies and it was all over the place. But this is exactly what happens. And even at that point, pulsatilla was again sort of one of the remedies coming up in this whole picture, and you would have had to go and study and look at all these different remedies and check whatever comes up. So what you're looking is, you realize we have a different state during acute and chronic, and so these are different layers in a way, and so you have to be able to use these different combinations and to check them out, to fine tune them and look at different ways on how you can combine different modalities and come up with different sets of remedies which will work very well together to take this case to conclusion. So hope that helps, and hope that helps you use these different sheets in your patients and make those multiple combinations and get the best out of repertorization. Thank you very much, and I'll come back to you with another tutorial. But check out the multi-sheet repertorization and let me know how you go.